Well, joining me now is Mr. Daniel Eyre of the Amnesty International. Mr. Daniel Eyre, you're welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Well, let's begin now with this popular report recently released by Amnesty International. You have tagged it stories of horror by the Nigerian military. And of course, it's about 130 pages. We're wondering, can you expatiate more on what is contained in that report?
Sure. So this report presents all of our findings about human rights violations committed by the Nigerian military in northeast Nigeria. It's the sequel to a report that we released in April that looked solely at crimes committed by Boko Haram, and we found then that Boko Haram had committed war crimes and crimes against humanity. This report's on the military. We find that more than 7,000 people died in military detention facilities since March 2011. And that's as a result of starvation, sometimes of suffocation, of a lack of access to medical treatment. So many died of disease. So that's deaths in custody. And then we also find that more than 1,200 men and boys were unlawfully killed by the Nigerian military during its operations. That includes incidents like the attack on Giwa Barracks. So you might remember that in March of last year, Boko Haram attacked Giwa Barracks, released the detainees that were in prison there, and then the military came back later that day, rounded up more than 640 of these detainees who were unarmed, and executed them. So those are the two main findings, deaths in custody and extrajudicial executions. Now, we've also found that we also have evidence that a number of senior military leaders in the Nigerian army knew about these crimes and either didn't take action to stop them or didn't investigate them. And so we believe that they should be investigated for their individual criminal responsibility for these crimes.
You see, you have named individuals, and of course many people would not take this lightly. It's quite they're huge allegations, I must say. You named two of the nation's current service chiefs, including Air Chief Marshal Bade, who is still the Chief of Defense Staff, and you also named General Ken Minima, who is still the Chief of Army Staff. And we're wondering, in what light and in what gave you the confidence to do these namings?
Well, our report is based on more than 400 interviews that we've done with a mixture of people. These are witnesses to human rights violations, people that themselves who are affected, so people that escaped military custody or were released by the army. They're also with human rights defenders, journalists, lawyers, local government officials, and also military sources, people from the inside who are able to give us information confidentially about what was going on. We've also made use of more than 90 videos of human rights violations. I mentioned the Giwa Barracks attack earlier and the executions that day. We actually released back in August video footage of Nigerian soldiers executing young men. I'm not sure if you saw the video. You might remember that the men were lined up in a row. The military called them forwards one by one, held them in front of an open pit and cut their throats with knives. Truly horrific scenes. So we reviewed all these videos, and we also looked at more than 500 military documents that were leaked to us. And so for each incident that we're talking about in the report, we're not only relying on one source, we use multiple independent sources to corroborate what happened. Now, in terms of naming individuals, what some of these documents show us is that the commanders in Abuja were regularly informed by people on the ground in the northeast about what was going on. So a lot of these reports contain information that say, for example, today in Giwa Barracks, 37 people died after brief illness. The next day, a similar number of people died after brief illness, and so on and so on. These were daily deaths in custody that were happening. And so the military was constantly being informed about this at the level of Abuja. These documents were going to the chiefs of staff. So these people knew about what was going on in northeast Nigeria, but these deaths continued. We didn't see them taking action to either investigate what was going on adequately or take action to stop it. There were also a number of commissions of inquiry that were set up by the military, the joint investigation teams. They actually went to some of these detention facilities, reported back on what happened, on what was going on there, the appalling conditions that we've talked about in the report, no insufficient food for people to live on, resulting in starvation, the fact that you had people so crammed into these cells that there wasn't space for them to sit down, they would have to take turns. And sorry, also the horrific lack of sanitation, so the fact that disease was rife in these cells because people didn't have access to toilets. So you can imagine the kind of horrible conditions that people had to live in. So these teams reported back to Defence Headquarters and Army Headquarters about what was going on, and still we didn't see enough being done to end deaths in military custody. And not only that, but Amnesty has raised these issues many times, along with other human rights organisations. We repeatedly engaged the service chiefs that you mentioned, the previous administration.
You had meetings with them?
We had many meetings. We met with people like the Attorney General's Office, the National Security Advisor's Office. We met with the Office of the Chief of Army Staff, and we sent an invitation back in September to meet with the Chief of Defence Staff, and he sent a delegate to the meeting that we held with the National Security Advisor. What was the
outcome of that meeting?
Well, afterwards we sent a detailed memo setting out our findings, much the same as you see in the report today. And we also requested information about what was being, about asking for their response to our allegations and requesting additional information about what was being done to prevent deaths in custody, to make sure that the people who were in detention were actually brought before a court.
Can I chip this in? Mm-hmm. At the point of your meeting with service chiefs, you said?
They're representatives, so it wasn't at the level of the Chief of Army and Defence Staff, but we met with senior officials.
Did you laid bare your revelations?
So we said that we had found that there were large numbers of deaths in military custody, that people were being unlawfully killed by the Nigerian army.
What was their response exactly?
Well, in some cases we were told that our research was questioned, that they felt we didn't have our facts straight. Sometimes they accepted that there were problems in the approach in the Northeast and that they were taking steps to improve the situation. Sometimes they promised to give us additional information that would address some of our concerns. But the fact is that deaths in custody are still ongoing. In our report we've documented cases of unlawful killings as recent as November of last year. And we haven't seen the kind of changes that we've been looking for.
Very well. You also mentioned that you have about 20,000 young men and boys since 2009. You have that also as part of your revelations, that the military have arrested them, and you have so many cases of deaths and mass graves. As a matter of fact, I saw the video. They're quite gruesome. But I'm wondering right now, how do you confirm or authenticate these testimonials? Because you mentioned earlier that you make calls from London to Nigeria, meaning that most of the time you were not on ground, on the field. So you got your information from people from the Northeast. So how do you authenticate that report?
So let me be clear. First of all, this report is based on 6 visits to northeast Nigeria by Amnesty researchers and 1 visit to northern Cameroon by our researchers, where we interviewed Nigerians that had fled the conflicts. So we are on the ground. We do speak to people on the ground in person. But we also work with a well-developed network of very trusted sources, and these people are able to put us in direct contact with witnesses to human rights violations, people themselves. I myself, from London, have interviewed people that were in Giwa barracks that were able to escape. And the thing is, at Amnesty, we don't only rely on one source for any particular claim. We make sure that we have multiple independent sources to back up our claims. So let's take the example of the Giwa barracks video. So soldiers executing people that they had recaptured earlier that day. We did an analysis of the video, and we were able to see from the video that there was that some of the soldiers were wearing flat jackets that said Operation Flush Borno State. That gives us a clue. One of them had a serial number was visible on his gun, where it said 81BN, and then other figures. We checked that with our military sources. That referred to 81 Battalion based in 7 Division in the northeast. But that's not enough, that's just circumstantial evidence from the video. So we also spoke to eyewitnesses, people who were there, that were able to tell us, yes, it happened on the 14th of March, the day of the attack. Yes, it was Nigerian soldiers, and they give us more information. Lastly, one of the people in the videos, who was killed in the video, we had actually interviewed his family. We spoke to his mother about his arrest a few years before, and I myself interviewed his uncle, who watched the video and was able to say, yes, that's my nephew. He was he was arrested in these circumstances, and it matched exactly what the mother had told us, and that's how we worked out who it was. So we're always careful to cross-check our facts, but first and foremost, our allegations are before the Nigerian government for them to investigate. We didn't see credible investigations from the last government. What happened after Giwa Barracks attack, the military promised that they would investigate. They set up a committee to do so. And yet, as far as we're aware, no one has been held accountable. The results of those investigations haven't been made public. So we're hoping that with the new administration, we will see a renewed commitment to investigate the kind of human rights violations that we believe amount to war crimes that we're raising now in this report.
I had to hold on to your thought. We're still with the Nigerian researcher for Amnesty International, Mr. Daniel Eyre. When we come back, we'll talk more about the recent reports released by Amnesty International. Stay with us.
The armed forces will be fully charged with prosecuting the fight against Boko Haram. We shall overhaul the rules of engagement to avoid human rights violations in operations. We shall improve operational and legal mechanisms so that disciplinary steps are taken against proven human rights violations by the armed forces.